COVID-19 has posed an unprecedented shock across the world, with disruptions to daily life and economic activities, triggering one of the worst job crises since the Great Depression, according to the OECD. It's also displaced millions of students around the world, from primary school students to university graduates, and simply reopening businesses and schools won't likely solve the problem. It's clear that not all jobs are coming back, and especially with the proliferation of digital technologies, the nature of work and human productivity will inevitably change. To help us make sense of some of these changes that are coming our way and how we can prepare, we speak with Kaushik BASU, Karl Marx Professor of International Studies and Professor of Economics at Cornell University. He was the Chief Economist of the World Bank from 2012 to 2016. We also connect with Chu Li, Chairperson of the Asia Education Commission and Professor at Korea Development Institute School of Public Policy and Management. He served as South Korea's Minister of Education, Science and Technology from 2010 to 2013. Thank you both so much for joining us today. And well, there's a big crisis and a lot of things to talk about today, so we'll go straight into the questions. Starting with you, Professor BASU. Now, given this acceleration of digital technologies that we're using throughout the pandemic, it seems that many companies won't be taking on as many human workers after we move on from this crisis. And you wrote that labour-saving and labour-shifting technology are precipitating a labour versus capital problem. How likely do you think is the prospect of jobless growth in the years to come after the pandemic?
Thank you for having me on the show. I do believe that it is going to get more difficult, the joblessness problem, and for a particular reason. What you refer to, I have been writing for some time that over the last 40 years, 4 decades, maybe 5 decades, jobless growth is taking place. Technology is beginning to displace labor, and you can see that on data. I've got some hard data on with me that the share of the GDP that goes to workers over the last 40 years in all advanced economies, middle-income economies is dropping. But in addition, something has happened during the pandemic, which I am fearing is going to make the problem worse. I mean, the term worse is, of course, a normative term, but it's going to make it more acute in the following sense. The digital technology was already there. Over the last 20 years, we've had a lot of digital technology. What has happened during the pandemic is we have been learning to use it faster than we could have imagined. I mean, I just think that a year ago, a year and a half ago, giving a lecture on Zoom, I would feel uncomfortable. But I'm now completely comfortable with my students, having meetings, with writing for them, all doing it on Zoom. So what is happening right now is a suddenly speeding up of the learning of the use of this technology. And in economics, there's an old concept, which Professor Lee will be familiar with, called learning by doing. So this learning by doing has got stepped up over the last year and a half. And my expectation is that globalization, maybe there will be initially some stumbling blocks because people are feeling very troubled by globalization, so they will protest, they will try to resist it. But give 2-3 years after that initial bumps, globalization is going to pick up. The use of digital technology is going to pick up because all of us are very conversant. Teaching, I was just thinking I can do much more teaching around the world, sitting in my room over here at home or in office. All this is going to pick up. So the nature of work, which had begun to change 40, 50 years ago and was changing steadily, which was getting us worried, that's going to be stepped up. And the big challenge will be, we will have to learn to cope with this. Education has to change so that the mindsets of human beings becomes a more creative mind being able to take in. And we have to very quickly adjust to new forms of work, which means some countries that will succeed in doing this will come out on top. Some countries which will find it difficult to cope with this rapid change will probably stumble and do very poorly. So we are standing on the brink of a very different world, and I feel it's going to speed up rather than slow down because of the last 1.5 years of COVID-19.
Yes, it is shaping up to be a very different looking world, and Now, Professor Lee, as more and more sectors of the economy become digitalized, are traditional modes of learning in high schools and colleges, do you think they're becoming irrelevant? I mean, what kind of skill sets do you think are going to be required of the future workforce to make them competent in this very digitalized era?
Thank you for having me, Suyang. In a highly digitized world, the speed of knowledge accumulation has been rapidly accelerating. Until 1900, human knowledge doubled every 100 years. But with the new technologies such as Internet of Things and AI, it takes only 12 hours to double the amount of knowledge. And as Dr. BASU has emphasized, this process has been accelerating, especially after the pandemic. So what you know becomes less important, and what you can do with what you know is more important. This does not mean that knowledge is not important any longer. Students should learn to understand core concepts and essential contents in order to have the solid knowledge foundation. But on the top of that, they should develop high-order thinking skills such as how to apply, analyze, evaluate, and create, as well as social-emotional skills or soft skills such as how to collaborate and communicate. Therefore, schools and universities, they used to focus on just delivering the knowledge contents to students, will become rapidly irrelevant unless they could transform themselves to design the learning environment for students to acquire new skill sets such as high-order thinking skills and social-emotional skills or soft skills.
And well, although digitalization is very exciting, there is still this displacement of traditional jobs and work that we had in the past. And Dr. Lee, you've been calling for a high-touch, high-tech approach to education. How can this really overcome the sort of crisis of automation that we're seeing and really turn it into an opportunity?
Like its name suggests, the high-touch, high-tech learning approach consists of two distinct components. High-tech refers to the adaptive learning technology such as AI tutor that tailors instruction to diverse learning levels and needs, allowing students to be stimulated and nurtured as they progress at their own pace. Complementing the high-tech element is the high-touch component provided by teachers. With the inclusion of adaptive learning technology, teachers are afforded the capacity to supply more personalized guidance through software-informed data, as well as time to supervise active, interactive, and collaborative learning experiences that foster higher order social, emotional, and soft skills. New technologies not only require new skill sets for the workforce, but also at the same time provide teachers with new learning tools such as AI tutor that could help them to transform their roles to focus more on nurturing new sets of skills for students. So crisis can be turned into an opportunity here.
Well, Dr. BASU, as you have written quite extensively in the past, digitalization and automation is coming, but this year of the second year now of the COVID pandemic, it's really hitting youth particularly hard. And in many parts of the world, young people have lost their jobs due to the pandemic, and youth are now feeling generally pessimistic about accumulating future wealth, and they're also worried about the lack of social security. And here in South Korea, we're actually seeing many people in their 20s and 30s buying up cryptocurrency to accumulate wealth, and some are even quitting their day job to take up trading. What are your thoughts on this kind of phenomenon? What kind of measures do you think government should really aim to design to mitigate the impact of this employment shock?
So in the short run, actually, this is quite a challenge because I think in the long run, we will probably come out with new forms of teaching, as Professor Lee just mentioned, and a lot of innovation on that. But what you are saying just now, Young, it draws attention to also the psychological social problems which a lot of the youth are facing. Because one positive feature of traditional education is you're in a classroom, you're interacting with people. That human side, when it suddenly drops off and you're leading more of an interaction with digital technology, that does cause psychological pressures, especially in youngsters who are more vulnerable to this. This is going to cause problems. Also, the disenchantment which is making people sort of drop out of their conventional career paths and look for different measures and different methods is going to be a big challenge, because if you look at youth unemployment, it's really going up. I know the figure in India, youth unemployment is right now at 24%. So of the youngsters who are looking for jobs, 24% is not finding jobs because the nature of jobs has changed. And it is true that with that, people are thinking of very novel ways, invest in cryptocurrency, something else, and make for a future. But all of these are very experimental moves. So over the next few years, we will see people will suddenly be disillusioned. What I invested in did not work. That crashed. So there is going to be this period. Here, the government does have a big responsibility in developing countries, in advanced economies like South Korea, and also, I feel, international organizations, multilateral organizations have to reach out, because there are poor countries, sub-Saharan Africa, parts of Asia, parts of Latin America, which are very poor. For them to take on the challenge that is being created by both the rapid rise of digital technology, labor being displaced, and the pandemic is huge. And you do need international transfers, at least in the short run, to provide buffer, fiscal space for African countries to do something for their youngsters and their youth, because you don't want to create a generation of disillusioned people who are growing up with that. So it is a very, very urgent time in the world to attend to economics along with the psychological needs of a big segment of the population that for no fault of their own they are facing. This is actually not fault of anyone, but it's a collective challenge that has opened up in the world.
Well, it's not completely easy, of course, but relatively easier for advanced nations to really take on these challenges and provide access to the sort of cutting-edge technologies. But of course, there's the problem of inequality. And Dr. Lee, how have you been addressing this kind of educational change and crisis? And how have you been promoting equal access to quality education, especially for marginalized groups in society and for students in schools around the world?
First of all, I fully agree with Dr. BASU that we do need fundamental change in education that requires collective actions, global actions together. So Hightech could be one of the alternative options because Hightech shows promises as a learning approach with the potential to diminish the ever persistent and achievement gaps in education. Since its inception in 2020, Education Commission Asia has led Hightech projects targeting low-income students, children of North Korean defectors, and multi-ethnic Korean youth. Through these initiatives, it has become evident that the combination of quality teachers and mentors with AI-assisted adaptive learning courseware can favorably impact students in their learning. While it may take a bit more time for rigorous impact evaluation studies to be produced, the anecdotal feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. A few weeks ago, from June 29th to 2nd of July, we had a Hightech 2021 Global Conference in order to share the Education Commission Asia's Hightech experience with global leaders and experts. And I believe that we had achieved firm global support for Hightech to benefit every learners in the world.
So we're hoping to see some of these discussions really go forward and produce a lot of creative policies. And Dr. BASU, in your most recent book, A Policymaker's Journal, you called for creative policies to overcome this sort of automation crisis. And well, how do you think we should really reimagine the value of work and wealth?
What I was appealing to was with a bit of a memory of world history, that the Industrial Revolution from, say, roughly 1750 to 1850 was at one level a time of opportunity, new technology coming in. But we do know, initially, it created huge hardships. The pollution in the atmosphere would darken the skies of European countries. Children would be laboring 10 hours, 12 hours a day. The reason why we came out of the Industrial Revolution, actually a winner in many ways, is there were two sides to it. One is very creative economics. from Adam Smith to John Stuart Mill, David Ricardo, the big theories of economics emerged during the period of the Industrial Revolution. So we are understanding the challenge of the world. We need that kind of creativity. Number two, that was a period also of dramatic new policies coming into space. Policies which today look to us very, very normal. You know, income tax was a non-existent thing. In 1842, when income tax was introduced, it was considered a crazy, radical policy. But we realized the world had changed, you needed that. I feel we are at a juncture of that kind, where we need novel forms of research and understanding of the new world that is coming out in front of us, and we need creative policies, novel policies, which I'm not even sure quite what that will be. I have some vague ideas about the directions in which we have to go, but this is the time for those challenges, and we need to come out on top the way we did come out on top earlier historically.
So we need creativity, and we also need to make really good use of the digital technologies that we have. And well, in order to address the sort of inequality and making sure that nobody is really left behind, Dr. Lee, how do you think personalised learning through initiatives like Hightech, Hightech could really close gaps of disparity between societies and within them as well?
I think the Hightech well resonates with the Dr. BASU's call for policymakers' creativity. Hightech allows for the fundamental shift in what and how students learn. As Hightech helps teachers to transform learning in schools to be more personalized, tailored to individual student levels and needs. And with the use of technology, this learning could be delivered at scale. So Education Commission Asia has already benefited 1,800 university students and 1,200 K-12 students from disadvantaged families with Hightech projects. So we promise this to become a global platform that supports the establishment, research, and evaluation of Hightech for all based on precise research. So Education Commission Asia aims to proceed with big leaps for a brighter future where everyone in the world gets the opportunity for high quality education.
So really to overcome this crisis, perhaps governments obviously need to really take this opportunity to use creative policies and also these adaptive and digitalized learning tools to create a better future and make sure that technologies don't just trickle down, but they're now targeted towards every individual in society. And well, this is where we have to end the interview today. But that was Dr. Kaushik BASU in New York and Dr. Chuo Lee in Seoul. Thank you both so much for your insights today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And to our viewers, as always, thank you very much for watching.